Issue 53. Odd, it starts out with the missing backup story this time, that's swell. Hamlin warns Sally that some strange-looking craft is showing up as she and her friends are in Robotropolis doing something. It turns out it's Knuckles and Julie Sue coming over for a visit. Julie says that the trip here all the way from the floating island wasn't that bad, a little annoyed by his complaining, so I guess she's not negative all the time. Still, she's not acting like the sarcastic, rebellious punk that I enjoyed so much. I'm really getting scared at this point that they'll forget what her character even was and just make her a boring nice girl or something. And her inexplicably smiling here isn't doing her any favors. Knuckles, being smart enough to leave out the part where she used to be part of the Dark Legion, explains that Julie and him weren't always friends, but they realized that they had things in common. And then he proceeds to annoy me by not explaining what those things are. I mean, I know they're both negative, sarcastic, hot-headed, and serious, and don't want to look weak by admitting that they need help or getting helped up, so they do have a lot in common, but Knuckles doesn't say any of that. Also, why is nobody questioning the fact that Julie's an echidna? Is it her pink hair? Do they not know she is one? They think that the echidna's supposed to be rare at this point, don't they? They'll still know she's not any species they're familiar with, even if she does have pink hair. Then a few comic panels are wasted, with Sally telling Knuckles stuff we already know, before it finally shows us Sally using the fake sword of acorns in a failed attempt to cure her father. At least this is finally brought up. Huh. Rotor actually discovers that the sword is fake. That's a relief, because if they never found out, they'd never start trying to look for the real one again. I'm not sure how Rotor would be able to tell that the sword is fake just by examining it, though. Just the fact that it didn't work should have been enough. Sally says that she was planning to go on her own quest, a stupid thing to do because she has no special powers, and even in the Sally miniseries she wasn't alone, so that doesn't prove anything. But her duty supervising the reconstruction of Robotropolis requires that she stays here. Knuckles says that he can't help her find the real Sword of Acorns now because he's too busy with his own comic. After Knuckles says that he discovered a mother he never knew he had after wasting comic space with a recap the audience should have already known, Sally decides to have Sonic and Knuckles have a heart-to-heart talk because Sonic had recently rediscovered his own mother. I guess her heart's in the right place, but every other time Sonic and Knuckles have been around each other, they've gone into fights. The comics made it pretty clear that they bitterly hate each other. Huh? The two of them are suddenly friends now? That's really weird. Sonic is acting unusually happy and friendly at seeing Knuckles again, complete with calling him Rad Red. The only explanation I can think of is that he's just that grateful for his help in the Endgame saga, but even that seems very uncharacteristic of him, especially since he was hardly the only one who helped. Dulcie and Jeffrey's men pitched in too. It is nice that Sonic immediately tries to thank him for his help all the way back then, and that Knuckles happily tells him to skip it because everything's cool, but still, this interaction between them is really unnatural. It feels like the Sonic OVA where Knuckles calls Sonic his best friend. Then Jules comes in calling Sonic Maurice, which makes Antoine naturally burst out laughing at him. But I thought Maurice was Sonic's middle name. Why the hell does father call him by his middle name? Especially since he finds it embarrassing. A good father wouldn't embarrass him that badly when he should really know better after all these years. Jules even explains that Maurice is his middle name. But then again, why did he call Sonic that? I like how a text blurb makes reference to Sonic Issue 0, when Sonic admitted to Sally that his middle name was actually Maurice and to not tell anyone. It's cool that they remembered that. And the story ends with Jules saying, if only he thought so, about Sonic and him being parent and kid. I guess Sonic's having a really hard time adjusting to Jules being a robot and can't like him as much for the time being. Makes sense, he looks pretty creepy. Now for the real meat of the issue. We start out with Sonic and Sally overlooking a giant building from a cliff, with Sally figuring that it's Robotnik's old laboratory, which is a separate building from his base, I assume, because Sonic's been to his base hundreds of times, but Sally and him are acting like they've never seen this place before. Wouldn't that be incredibly inconvenient having to constantly go back and forth between the two buildings? I actually giggled at Sonic's line here. And just think, Sally, it's all yours for the amazingly low price of nothing. I love it when he talks so whimsical like that. That's why I like him so much, the character, in the first place. Sally immediately shows she has no chemistry with Sonic by rebuking his fun attitude, saying, "This is no joke, Sonic," like Char on Secret Rings, and asks how he would feel if suddenly he was responsible for a device with the destructive power of the Ultimate Annihilator. What's the problem? If she doesn't want it, she could just have Rotor dismantle it. The only reason a person would logically have for being worried is that they think they'd be tempted to use it on someone. And Sally wouldn't do that. Sally reminds Sonic that they wouldn't still be alive if Eggman's weapon had succeeded. And then I laughed again at Sonic's response here. Chances would be kinda low, I guess. These are the types of jokes that work in Sonic. Sarcasm. Aw, I like this. Sally says, with everything you've done for the kingdom, I don't want to bother you with my dumb problems. And looks sad. She's being unselfish here, considerate. For some reason, I'm surprised. After Sonic is a good friend by reassuring her that her problems are not dumb, Sally explains that she feels a lot more pressure on her now that she's got to rule an entire kingdom of people all of a sudden. First of all, it's the king making all the decisions for her, like the previous issue said. So what pressure should she be feeling? And second, she's been running Knothole with the citizens in it since day one. And in the Fall of Robotropolis story, she basically assumed liberated the entirety of the city and got them all de-roboticized, or at least most of them. So she's had a lot of people she's in charge of already. I get her point though, that now that the Grobians have their free will again, the amount of citizens she's responsible for is way larger. But with the king being the real leader, why would she care? And Sonic is simply saying, I know, 4 times in a row in response to Sally's complaining. Again, how did this relationship last until they were married with children again? It looks like all that happens between them is Sally nagging and plumbing Sonic out. And I said Sonic is a good friend, but actually remember, they're boyfriend and girlfriend. But they're acting more like friends here. Like, I feel like this is a lot more natural of a transition. Rather than immediately having them waste comic space in action series by them just making out all the time, they act like friends, but closer, because they show affection to each other. It feels more natural. Then Sally hugs Sonic, which I would have found heartwarming, but the art is so bad that I can't really appreciate it. I think it's that Sonic's head is leaned forwards, his eyes are all wide and happy so it looks creepy, and I can't see Sally's head. It looks unnatural. And you know the art has problems when even I care enough to critique it. Jeffrey then interrupts them by revealing that they may be closer to uncrystallizing the king, showing up in a weird hooded cloak that looks ridiculous on him. Princess Sonic. I know that's not how he's saying it, but the text box still looks pretty funny. Those two words do not go together. Anyways, Jeffrey explains that Rotor, Uncle Chuck, and Dr. Quack are all investigating the portals to Zone of Silence within Julian's lab. What's with the so-called there? I'm really glad they hadn't forgotten Eggman has that portal in his lab. They seem to have forgotten about the whole black hole portal thing. He then reveals that they're planning on launching a probe into it. Sally says a useless line that she wouldn't have logically said that only serves to remind the audience what a Zone of Silence is, and Sonic is the cautious one for once, by saying he's not sure if sending the probe into that zone is a safe idea. Immediately, the comic proves him right by showing an explosion making the grass glow red and warping Sonic, Sally, and Jeffrey conveniently straight to the Zone of Silence with a knocked out Dr. Quack and Rotor, with several creepy villains facing them down. Remember, this zone was the place that criminals were banished to, because fuck using the death penalty on them. And right now, the heroes are facing the consequences of that idiotic decision. Ixis Naugus? That's what he looks like? That's the wizard guy I heard about before, but I wasn't expecting him to look like this at all. He's creepy, and even more so since he remembers Sally when Sally doesn't recognize him, meaning he met her when she was a lot younger, possibly even a baby. Ix just shows himself to be a jerk right away by trying to strike Sonic with green lightning just for talking. It sure is convenient that he doesn't try to do it again right after Sonic continues what he had been trying to say, explaining that he doesn't like him because he had been buddies with Warlord Kodos. Also, I kinda like the green lightning. Wizards using lightning or fire that's in weird colors is a perfect display of how magical they really are. Then Jeffrey gets attacked by Uma Arachnus, whoever that is, as Sonic had been dodging Ixis' blasts. Ixis then reveals himself as yet another generic take-over-the-world villain by saying he wants to take over Mobotropolis. It's so frustrating that this comic has so many villains other than Eggman, who still manage to not bother with any kind of excuse for why they're villains. That's barely solving the problem. After a few panels where I guess someone did something to hurt the villains, and I can't really tell what because the camera view is too close up, Uncle Chuck is shown, implying that he was the one who did it, somehow, and says that they should retreat. Rotor says that this door leads to Robotnik's hidden tunnels. So I'm guessing this is after he left the zone and returned to Robotnik's lab. And then as a bunch of villains talk together, make me wonder why they agreed to work together in the first place, one of them says so-called King Acorn, furthering my suspicions of the king. Sally tells King Acorn that the leader of the band of villains, Ixis Naugus, has a wand that can turn objects into crystal, And instead of immediately saying, "That must be why you're all crystallized," she instead asked the stupid question, "How is that possible?" "It's a wand. How do you think?" Rotor apologizes that he had no idea launching that probe would release that deadly trio. Wait, release? But they only fought them within the confines of the Zone of Silence. So it's not like they grabbed onto the probe and held on until they were outside the zone. Then Sonic raises a good question. Why didn't Ixis, Kodos, and Emo fall prey to the effects of the zone as the King did when exposed to Mobius' environment? Except that's not a good question, because 1, I'm pretty sure they haven't been back to Mobius' atmosphere yet. So of course they haven't been crystallizing. 2, they haven't been in it long enough. And 3, Kodos is there. But I saw Kodos get vaporized by a giant. Take that sentence out of context. So how is he fine now? The King says, while seeming winded when he had no problem with talking last issue, that Ixis is the rightful ruler of Mobitropolis. He then explains that after a while surviving the Zone of Silence, he no longer cared about doing so, because a few days after exposure to the zone, sounds and vibrations ceased to exist, giving an explanation for why it's called the Zone of Silence. Does that mean he goes deaf and loses his awareness of the feeling vibrations? How would the effects be maddening? People go deaf sometimes and they don't go mad. The King had been saved from a black hole by Ixis Nagas, who, actually was bothered to have somewhat of a backstory. He was once the Royal Wizard. I thought that was Merlin Prower. Did he replace him? Why didn't he get a replacement for Merlin when he left, if having a Royal Wizard is so customary? Anyways, Ixis Nagas is actually the supposed creator of the zone. I hate the supposed there. Wouldn't he know that for sure? Ixis Nagas hadn't been banished into it, he just vanished into it for some reason. Well, I guess it would be hard to banish a wizard, but that just makes me wonder why he's in there then. Ixis had found the means to prevent the insanity of the Zone of Silence by using his dark magics and the zone's natural resources. Magics sounds incorrect to me. I guess he only said that because he was a little winded and delirious, but then why is that the only mistaken speech that he made? Anyways, the King had formed a pact, exchanging flesh and blood for organic crystal that would grant him immunity. Immunity? But he clearly did go insane, not recognizing Sally and whatnot, so that didn't work. He must have been really desperate to believe that Ixis would actually follow through with his end of the bargain. So he's crystallizing because of a pact with Ixis, a pact that in exchange would require him to serve as the Knight of Ixis while Ixis was the King, as had the others in the zone who would also be knights. We clearly saw the King being treated as royalty in the Zone of Silence though, being crowned and addressed as a king by his frog subjects. Why would Ixis let him keep that kind of status? All of the knights had the ability to change from crystal to flesh and back again, but he had lost that ability when he escaped the zone. Okay, but he was clearly not in crystal form when he was carried out of the zone, so why is he crystallizing now? Sally then says that her father is in no position to make any decisions regarding the kingdom, and that's why she was appointed as acting ruler. I'm guessing she's only saying this for show because the previous issue stated that the king was the one really in charge and Sally was keeping that a secret. What she should be saying is that he had obviously made that pact under duress, and that kind of pact should not be considered legitimate in a court of law, especially not with someone like Ixis. Right afterwards, a loud sound is heard, Dr. Quack's papers are blown around, and the wall starts cracking. You shouldn't have left Eggman's portal open for him to crawl in, Rotor. After Jeffrey's men rush in against his order and hurt themselves, Kodos jumps in as well, and the freedom fighters become determined to get the king to safety. And then Sonic and Jeffrey fight the villains, with even Sally being able to chip in with the crossbow thingy. Kodos is then transformed into a giant crystal golem by Ixis. However, instead of them fighting it, Sonic goads Ixis into shooting at him because somehow he knows that his wand only affects inanimate objects, with his explanation being that this is why he'd only blast the area immediately in front of him, to hide it. He could have just had bad aim. Could have just been doing the James Bond villain thing where he doesn't kill him in the easiest way because that would be too easy. You know, like every other villain. How'd he figure this out? It almost feels like a Deus Ex Machina. I wasn't really sure what happened in this panel. It looked like something green and crystal like us shattered somehow. The next panel offers an explanation that this green shattered thing was Ixis' wand, which Sonic had destroyed. Then the golem collapses because without Ixis' wand to power the crystal guys, they're like puppets without strings. This feels like a very underwhelming defeat to the villains, with all of them disappearing really easily. I hope that means they're defeated for good, because these bland generic villains haven't endeared themselves to me at all. Good villains have actual explanations for why they became villains in the first place, justifications for their actions so they feel like actual people. Not to mention actual personalities that go beyond, "Rag, I'm evil, I want to take over the world," for no reason. Even Eggman felt like a more fleshed out character. At least he could be described as arrogant, bad hygiene, and having a weird vendetta against nature and love of pollution. The first story was written by Ken Penders, but there really isn't much to say about it because it only existed for Knuckles to learn that the Sword of Acorns was a fake and introduce Julie to the Freedom Fighters. Even then it failed at its job because she didn't show any sort of personality. Also, while it definitely succeeds at humanizing Sonic by giving him a father with a troubled relationship with him like a lot of other people, Sonic and Knuckles being unnaturally buddy-buddy all of a sudden felt like a black mark in the story that, combined with Julie soon not being spunky like usual, left a sour taste in my mouth. It ultimately failed at everything it was trying to do. The real story was written by Carl Bollers, and it definitely had a lot more good moments. I enjoyed Sonic's lines when he was spending some time with Sally at the start of the issue, and actually laughing from a couple of them. So his characterization is perfect here, although the chemistry between Sonic and Sally is not, as all Sally does is whine and get Sonic down. Just like I always imagined her being as Sonic's girlfriend. She has a point, so it's not really whining, but it's still not fun to read. I love the fact that the king's time in the Zone of Silence was finally elaborated on, but I still feel like there are holes in the gaps that weren't filled. Why was he still treated like a king even as his knight? Why did he get amnesia and become a violent man fixated on finishing off your enemies? And why didn't he get vaporized by the giant that I thought vaporized Kodos? And I still don't really understand why he's crystallizing. Worst of all, the real big problem with the story, it introduces a bunch of bland, generic villains with no personality or excuses for being bad guys, making them feel like they only exist to be bad guys, which is very lazy and uncreative. Even if I do love the concept of Ixis Naucus as an evil former royal wizard, just from being introduced to these villains, who I'm convinced are going to come back, I'm getting a feeling of dread that they're going to symbolize a dark age of the comic. I don't want Eggman's shoes to be filled with equally bland and generic villains who are somehow even less developed than he was. Though I still appreciate variety after getting thoroughly sick of the guy.